This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode, I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 25 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're going to slow down and talk about slow travel. Our topic is how slow is slow travel? So I guess probably we can agree broadly on a kind of a definition of slow travel. It's something to do with not rushing around and seeing all the sights. It might be something to do with taking longer to explore a place. But it's pretty hard to agree on exactly what it is. And today we're going to talk about how slowly should you travel to call it slow travel. So I've got three interesting guests who all have their own take on what slow travel really is, and we can talk about how slowly we should do it. As for me, I've done my fair share of slow travel, and it's definitely my preference. I guess that my slow travel really started when I was living abroad. So I lived in Japan for a couple of years, Slovakia for a year, and Germany for a few years. And I lived and worked there, but I was very mindful that really I was there to travel. The work was a bonus that funded the travel. And I definitely combined those jobs teaching with taking every possible chance to travel. Every long weekend I would get somewhere, or I would explore a lot around the local area as well. So I think that was pretty slow travel. But in the future, I do have lots of dreams of the kind of slow travel I'd like to do. I don't always have the opportunity to do it at the moment, especially with a young son in school. But in the future, a couple of the things I'd love to do, which are pretty slow, live in New York City for at least a couple of months. I was there just for 5 days, nearly a decade ago now, and I would just love to go back and really explore it. I stayed in the YMCA hostel when I was in New York, and I always remember looking through their program of the different activities available and the different short courses you could take. And I just thought, oh my goodness, you can learn anything you want. I wish I could come and stay here and do this. So that's my dream one day to do that. And the other place I want to do some more slow traveling in the future is Iceland. You will know already, I'm sure, that I really loved my trip to Iceland last year. And in particular, I have this fantasy of going back to Kirkjufell on the west coast. It's a mountain often described as Iceland's most beautiful mountain in the tourist literature. And we stayed in a little Airbnb log cabin at the foot of Kirkjufell. And my dream is to go back there in summer when it's light 24 hours a day, like when I was there the first time, and hire that cabin for at least a month and write a book. So one day, I hope to be able to do that. I'm a little bit worried, though. Iceland's becoming so popular that by the time I get back to Kirkjufell, there might not be just two little log cabins at the foot of it, but like an entire resort or something. So I'm not relying on that one being able to come true exactly as I envisage. But anyway, so today's first guest is, in some senses, definitely the king of slow travel. If we're talking about how slow is slow travel, Jeff Ryan has just released his book about hiking the Appalachian Trail, and the title tells you how slow he travels. It's the Appalachian Odyssey, a 28-year hike on America's trail. So I think he has definitely the right to say quite a lot about slow travel. For someone who has just written a book about a 28-year hike, I have to give you the award for being the slowest traveller I've had on the podcast so far.
Yeah, I've heard that. It's funny. One of the reviewers said I set no speed record for the Appalachian Trail, and that is certainly true. And it's a juxtaposition against some of the people who do it in 40 days or whatnot. But it's really funny how this whole journey unfolded. And in fact, we did not set out to hike the Appalachian Trail. We were just doing what we like to do, and it was actually several years into it that my travel mate said to me, you do realize that we're hiking the Appalachian Trail, don't you?" And I laughed and I said, but at this rate, it will take us 30 years. And he said, "So what?" And I laughed and I said, "Boy, you've got a point there." So we continued to do it. And every winter we would take turns choosing a different section. So we didn't simply get on where we got off the last time, which also made it a really interesting thing. But what I found about doing it slowly, and I think it's important for me to say that I truly admire the people who do the trip in one shot. As I mentioned, I have done a long trip, several 6.5 month trip before, thousands of mile trip before. But doing it this way, it's like making a beef stew and letting it sit for a few days and it tastes better. I just found that doing it this way allowed a depth of experience that I just don't think that you can get if you're trying to accomplish it in one shot. If you're doing it in one shot, you always need to be on pace and you always need to be somewhere. And doing it this way, we never really needed to be somewhere. If we wanted to slow down and enjoy it, have a campsite on top of a mountain instead of at an 8 mile day mark, instead of feeling like we had to make 10 or 12 every day, we could do that. We would simply make up the miles later or get off the trail at a different point, which we had the flexibility to do. And I think that alone really added an amazing depth of experience. And I also think it added a depth of friendship that truly when we started out, Wayne and I were nearly polar opposites personality-wise, and in many ways we still are, but that overlap, what I referred to as the Venn diagram, the overlap in the circles got larger and larger as the years went by. And I think that's greatly due to the fact that we spent a lot of time together, but we had a lot of experiences together. And when you can have an experience that you can draw on and reminisce about and laugh about, it really makes the journey that much more enjoyable.
Oh, it certainly does. And I think what you say about a depth of experience is really true. And the fact that because you did this journey over, nearly 3 decades, you were at different phases of your life during different hikes. So you would have got different things out of it at different parts of your life.
Oh my gosh, yes. And the other piece of that is everything changed. Our friendship changed, the technology changed, the gear changed, the food changed, and everything was evolving, and to a really great place, I may add. I mean, all of those things got better. When we started, it was Lipton cup of soup in a cup, and when we finished, it was pesto with shrimp. So I think that. Those things weren't available when we started, and we were drying our own food, and we were making do with what we could do. We were making gourmet meals in a different way, and in some cases they were distinctly not gourmet. I mentioned that I declare the fall of the ramen empire a couple of times. I just could not eat ramen anymore.
I can imagine. There is definitely such a thing as too much ramen.
Yeah, there is, and my threshold is very short.
It would be by now, yes.
At this point, my mother was a gourmet cook, so I have very little junk food threshold, but so that was an interesting thing, and the gear changed quite a bit, and of course we changed our as I'm fond of saying, those young skinny muscle bound guys are still slightly muscle bound, but have a lot less hair and a different body shape, and I think that's really cool too. That at the time we finished the trail, we were 58 years old, and people would look at us in the train station. We were somewhat of an oddity. People would come up to us and say, "What are you guys doing?"
Oh, really?
And we'd say, "Well, we've been out for 28 years," and they'd shake our hands and get this look in their eye like, "Oh my God, I could never do that."
Yeah.
And I would say, "Sure you can. You absolutely can." That's a great misnomer, I think, and it's sad. But the reality is anyone can do it. You just have to put your mind to it. And I think it's a great analogy for anything we want to accomplish. We don't have to quit the day job and cash in the 401k and do this big, hairy, audacious thing. We can poke away at what we love to do in the background.
Absolutely, bit by bit. And sometimes that's even better than quitting everything and doing it all at once.
Oh, I think it's infinitely better. For a society that I believe is largely risk averse, it doesn't give you an excuse.
Well,
I mean, there
right.
really is no excuse.
I really love Jeff's take on slow travel. It's pretty extreme slow travel, I think, taking 28 years to cover the Appalachian Trail. But there's some obvious benefits and so much to learn by doing it that way. I love that it's kind of a barometer of what else is happening in his life and what else has changed, but the trail remains the same. Really cool stuff, I think. So from Jeff's 28 years, I'm taking it to the other end of slow travel, I guess. My next guests are Jeremy and Katie Kloberdanz of The Life Bohemian. And they are travelling full-time at the moment and working while they travel. They work online. So they are trying to spend a decent amount of time in each place that they stay, but they're still trying to see a lot at the same time. So it's interesting to hear about their take on how slow is slow travel.
So slow travel wasn't something that was even on our radar until we started this process. And we had to learn quickly that there's definitely a difference between vacationing and traveling. And when we first started our journey, we were still in vacation mode. And so we were packing just way too much stuff. We thought that we needed to do everything every single day. And it was a game changer for us when we started to really slow down and not just slow down for our own sake, but also slow down in knowing that a lot of these places are going to always be there. They're going to continue to be there, So like the Colosseum in Rome has been there for
3,000 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Pretty safe bet. If you don't make it this time, it'll still be there next time.
Yeah, if I don't get there today, it's going to be there next week, or it's going to be there in 10 years. So we try not to feel the pressure anymore of, I have to get here. I have to get here. Granted, there are definitely some places that are disappearing and that are more time sensitive, but Rome's not going anywhere. Paris is not going anywhere. So if we don't have to shove everything into one day and be so exhausted that we're burnt out. We can kind of spread things out, slow down, really, really move with more intention.
And it really hit us because we were exhausted at the beginning, and it wasn't sustainable for us to continue like that. And in fact, Amanda, Katie's mom just actually left yesterday. She'd come and met us in Greece, and then we went to Cyprus together. So she was with us for about a month, and I told Katie at the end of it, "Hey, I'm exhausted. Not because it's my mother-in-law being there, but because we felt like we needed to entertain her the entire time, and we felt like we needed to go, show her all we could."
Yeah, it's so different. She was on vacation, and we tried to really, view things through her eyes, and she wanted to do a lot of stuff, but then we were so tired. I'm still tired.
Yes, takes a while to catch up from that. That's so true.
It does.
Yeah. I was just saying, I sort of came to slow travel by accident because I was living in places like I moved to Japan, lived and worked there. So by nature, I couldn't travel all the time, and I was just kind of, getting to know the culture by living in it. And then I would take, short trips here and there during that time. And I came to realize that, being stuck in one place and for a longer time was just so much more enjoyable. And it was just so much more interesting than, racing around Europe, the horrible, 2 months and see every country. And
for us, we're always looking to adapt and to get better at what we're doing, and we try to figure out what the sweet spot for ourselves is. And we found that any less than a week in the places that we go isn't quite enough. We feel like we are rushing things, and any more, depending on the place, of course, but any more than 2.5, 3 weeks, we're starting to get to that point where we're repeating ourselves, or we're searching for, and there's always something to do. I don't want to say, oh, there's after 3 months or after 3 weeks, there's nothing to do, but we've gotten enough out of it that we feel like we can move on and come back at a later date.
Well, and I think we're just getting a little bit kind of itching to move again.
Yeah, and see something that's brand new again.
Yeah.
I think that sounds like a reasonable amount of time, a week to sort of 2.5, 3 weeks. Anywhere you can get a decent feel for it. You can find a favorite coffee shop. You can probably get to know some of the locals nearby, and especially if you're staying in Airbnbs and stuff, and you know, in a kind of a local neighborhood, you're probably starting to have routines, and I think that's enough to sometimes get to know a place, because you do have the whole world out there to see.
That just a small routine, I think it really makes a big difference, because it's one of the things that you miss when you leave home, or when you're traveling for a long time, something like that. Humans, we're like hardwired to love routines and to love, things that are the same every day and stuff like that. And so for us, even a small little hint of routine in this kind of hectic life is very welcome.
Oh, absolutely. I would never have admitted to being a fan of routines, but now that I've got a child, then that makes it much clearer, because I think all children love routines. And when I travel with him, we try and stay in the one place for a week or two. And he loves that, and he gets to know, now we'll go for breakfast over here, and then we'll go to the supermarket later in the day, or, the kinds of routine things that you might do often when you're staying in one spot for a couple of weeks. And those are the things he often remembers. He'll remember the funny supermarket across from our hotel in Penang, where we went, every day probably to stock up on new weird stuff. And I think that it's nice to have those sort of mini routines, as you say.
Yeah, I'm the same way. If you would have asked me, I'd be like, oh, well, I'm a hippie and I love to move and I want to do this and I'm going to move all the time and I hate routines and I'm going to stay in a hut in the middle of nowhere. And now I'm like, oh my God, can I go to the same coffee shop every single day and make a friend, please?
Yes, exactly. I had a guest a while ago that said that slow travel to him was going to the same coffee shop every day for long enough that the staff knew you and they knew your order. And that was when he was doing slow travel right. So I thought that was a great way to put it.
Well, I feel he is speaking my language, because the coffee shop every single day, the same one, that is definitely what I'm going for.
And what we really try to do is just, instead of feeling that pressure, like Katie said, to do it all, we try to pick one thing or zero things sometimes to do in a day. And we know, okay, the site that we want to see, or the museum we want to go to, or the restaurant maybe that we want to go to is in this general direction. And let's discover something that we normally wouldn't have done along the way. And that helps us as well not feel like, okay, we have an hour to spend here, we have 15 minutes to spend here, then we need to take the train here, and we need to do it. It lets us wander enough that we keep new and fresh and interesting things happening, while still getting to see the things that we do plan and want to see.
I think the fact that Jeremy and Katie have kind of had to learn and experiment about slow travel along their way is a really important point. None of us exactly know what slow travel is, and especially what version of slow travel works for us. So I think it's something we need to consciously think about both before and during our trips, so that we can make the most of our experiences in a way that works for our situation. And I did mention in there one of my previous guests, and I wanted to check who it was, and it was David Soto Jr. of the Primitive View, who told us that slow travel was being in the same place long enough so that the people at the coffee shop know your order. I think that's a really good definition of it, and something I will aim for. Now, my next guest has another version of discussing slow travel. So I'm about to talk with Lola Akinmade-Åkerström, who's from Nigeria but lives in Sweden and blogs at Geo Traveller's Niche. She's also an amazing photographer. I'll link to some of her stuff in the show notes. But her version of discussing slow travel is not that it's about how long it takes, but it's much more about how you do it.
I think there's a lot of misconception around the word slow travel because people think of slow travel as duration, but slow travel is actually about pace. So it has nothing to do with the duration of your time in a place. It has to do with the pace of your time in a place. Meaning,
That's very well put.
It's true though, because I can actually, so for example, I can actually slow travel through a culture, even if it's just 24 hours, based on what I choose to do. And that's why I always say because I am an advocate of slow travel. I have a site called Slow Travel Stockholm. And I say, pick what you really like your theme, and then explore the culture through that theme. So for example, if I'm a music lover, yes, I know it would be great to go eat up all the major sites at the place. Sometimes maybe just explore the culture through music, through its different, musical traditions, maybe through its music museums, anything that I really, really like. That's why I love, going through food experiences because I really enjoy that. And so what I do is I slow my pace in a place by exploring the culture through food, through the lifestyles around food and stuff like that, tradition. So that's what I mean by traveling slowly. So for example, for me, a worthwhile day could be, I love seafood a lot. So I could say, okay, traveling slowly could be waking up early in the morning, going out to a fish market, spending a few hours at the fish market, maybe grabbing seafood lunch, then maybe after that, going to explore more about, maybe a food tour or something, but keeping that theme through that day helps me to travel slowly.
That's a really great way to think about it. Yeah, instead of going to Paris and thinking I must go to all the art museums and the Eiffel Tower, but to think of it in terms of music or food or something like that. And
exactly.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to frame it to get people to really think about how to travel more slowly.
That's it, because I've got a family. I can't go living somewhere else for like a month to feel like I'm traveling slowly, because it has nothing to do with like I said, the duration of your time in a place. It's the pace of your time in a place. And I know people feel like, well, I only have this short time. I want to see everything, to each his own. But for me, I find like the most rewarding experiences are when I travel based on what I personally like a theme, and just kind of keep exploring it from different angles, the same thing. Then I come back with a lot more depth.
I think that's a great way to do it. And I mean, the top sightseeing spots and all of those, popular places, we can find out enough about them, quickly online. It's not necessary, if they're not really related to our strong interests, to experience them personally. So
yeah, and like I said, people, if they want to do it, I cannot stop somebody from going to the Eiffel Tower. That's that's iconic. But what I'm saying is, they should, when they're planning, at least plan some time, to slow down and explore it based on one of their themes, instead of just jumping from site to site to site to site. That's slow travel to me.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so many potential benefits from that. You're probably more likely to, meet local people and have some, longer, closer contact, and have a really individualized, unique experience that, probably no one else has. And it's not something you necessarily read about, but it's something that's really enjoyable for you. I think these are such wise words from Lola on giving up on that exhaustive list of sightseeing spots that you have to see, and instead focusing on exploring a destination through what really interests you. I've done this accidentally when I've travelled with my son, because especially when he was younger, sort of 3, 4, 5, it's pretty important to travel to a destination and be fairly kid-focused so that he can enjoy it. Otherwise, I don't really enjoy it. But it would be really nice in the future to think about what I'm especially interested in seeing, and being more mindful of focusing on that and ignoring some of the rest. It's a really nice lens to look through when you travel, I think. So I hope that helps you think about how slow travel really is, at least what kind of slow travel you think suits you, do let me know what your version of slow travel is. What's your ideal way to travel slowly? You can reach me on Twitter at Amanda Kendall and use the Thoughtful Travel Pod hashtag, or look me up on Facebook. You can find me at Not a Ballerina. Just search for Not a Ballerina and you'll find our Facebook page, and you can leave me a message there or comment on the posts about the podcast. As always, thank you very much to my wonderful guests. Let me tell you where you can find them. So first of all, Jeff Ryan, he can be found on the web at jeffryanauthor.com, and his book, The Appalachian Odyssey, is on Amazon and pretty much everywhere, but I'll leave some links to that in the show notes. Thanks also to Jeremy and Katie Kloberdanz of The Life Bohemian. You can find them at their blog, The Life Bohemian, thelifebohemian.com, or you can find their Life Bohemian podcast as well in iTunes. And finally, the lovely Lola of GeoTraveler's Niche. You can find her website at lolaakinmade.com. And I'll also link to her Slow Travel Stockholm site, because that's particularly relevant when we're talking slow travel. We've talked about slow travel once before in episode 13, taking it slow, travelling to feel like a local. So if you're keen to hear more about slow travel and you missed that episode, I'll leave a link for that in the show notes as well. And finally, if you are a regular listener, we would really love you to take our Jackrabbit FM listener survey. As you know, the Thoughtful Travel podcast is part of the Jackrabbit FM podcast network, and this month we're doing a listener survey to find out more about what our listeners like and more about what they would like to have in the future. So there's a link in the show notes, but it's easy to find at jackrabbit.fm/survey. And it would be fantastic if you can take just a couple of minutes to leave us some feedback there. All of these details and more will be in the show notes. And for this episode, you can find the show notes at notaballerina.com/25. Thank you so much for listening, and happy slow travelling. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.
Jackrabbit FM. For your ears.
Who is that? Hi, Podcast.